In the video I posted just a few days ago about the lab leak hypothesis, I called out the U.S. Congress for wasting time allowing Marjorie Taylor Greene to scream at Dr. Anthony Fauci instead of conducting an actual helpful investigation into our response to COVID-19, which I thought could cover things like which politicians were responsible for spreading misinformation that led to extra deaths. At the time, I was thinking about people like Donald Trump, obviously, but also people who are still currently in power, like Ron DeSantis. I was not necessarily or specifically thinking about the CIA, but I should have been, because within moments of me finishing that video, before it went live, I saw this explosive investigation from Reuters. Pentagon ran secret anti-vax campaign to undermine China during pandemic. Fucking Christ. Are you kidding me? As usual, the link to the article is in the transcript, which is linked in the doobly-doo or easily found at patreon.com/Rebecca. It is free to everyone, but especially to patrons. But spoiler alert, they admitted it. This happened. Everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. This is not some weird QAnon conspiracy theory. In the spring of 2020, when COVID-19 was killing tens of thousands of people per day, the U.S. military launched an anti-vaccine propaganda campaign in Southeast Asia in order to undermine worldwide trust in China. They began by targeting people in the Philippines, spreading memes on social media, like on Facebook and Shitter, that claimed that China were not just the source of COVID-19, but that they purposely released the virus in order to push their own vaccines, Sinovac, which the bots claimed contained pork gelatin and therefore should be forbidden amongst Muslims. This, despite the fact that Sinovac claimed the vaccines were produced without pork products, and the fact that mainstream Islamic authorities confirmed at the time that even if the vaccines were made with pork, they would still be fine for Muslims to take. Because, let's be serious, when science and religion clash in a way that puts lives at risk, the smarter religious leaders learn to interpret their rules in a way that keeps their adherents alive. There's a reason why the number of Christian scientists has cratered in the past 100 years of medical advances. If you're looking at the timeline of all of this and you're feeling a little confused, let me be clear. Yes, this campaign launched several months before China had even finished producing their vaccine. They were priming people to reject the vaccine before it had even dropped. The same way bigots give bad reviews to movies before they premiere because they saw a black woman in the trailer. A little well poisoning as a treat. But instead of just screwing with a movie studio's bottom line, the United States government actually contributed to, if not outright caused, tens of thousands of deaths from COVID in the Philippines, leading to the country having the lowest vaccination rate in Southeast Asia at just 2% at the time just after vaccines became available. And why? Because Chinese authorities were spreading disinformation that COVID-19 actually started here in the United States. They punched us in the face, so we burnt down someone else's house. Perfectly reasonable. And if you can believe it, the story actually gets worse the more details you learn. Here's just a fun selection I've chosen before you dig into the whole article yourself. First, one officer involved in the campaign specifically said they did it because we didn't do a good job sharing vaccines with partners, so what was left to us was to throw shade on China's. Haha, remember when the vaccines came out and we were all like, hey, global health is important because viruses don't respect national borders. Can we please share vaccines with the world? And Bill Gates and friends said, LOL, no. Well, the military's response was to make the problem that we were calling out 1,000,000 times worse. Cool. Very cool, guys. Second, the operation was done so sloppily that Facebook figured out what the U.S. military was up to and went to them to tell them to knock it off within a few months of them starting. The military responded by begging Facebook not to delete their bot accounts, and in return, they promised they would stop with the hardcore anti-vax stuff. Facebook agreed to that, but the military decided not to keep up their end of the bargain, and they continued to spread anti-vax disinformation. Third, we can't just blame this on Donald Trump. Yes, the campaign started under his leadership, and his administration is the one that changed some rules that allowed it to happen. They made this legal gray area, despite it ostensibly being peacetime with the countries we were attacking. But when the anti-vax propaganda was still showing up after Joe Biden took office, Facebook had to go back and ask them to stop again just after the inauguration in January of 2021. The discussion, quote, was terrible, said a senior administration official describing the reaction after learning of the campaign's pig-related posts. I was shocked. The administration was pro-vaccine, and our concern was this could affect vaccine hesitancy, especially in developing countries. It took several more months before the National Security Council issued a directive to stop the campaign, and then several more months after that for the campaign to actually stop. The Reuters piece ends on this harrowing note. In February, the contractor that worked on the anti-vax campaign, General Dynamics IT, won a $493 million contract. Its mission to continue providing clandestine influence services for the military. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans here in the United States. What I am going to say is that we can't just say, well, Trump was crazy, wasn't he? And then forget all about this. I was glad to see this piece also point out a previous instance of the U.S. military doing possibly irreparable damage to public health in developing countries. In 2011, the United States military figured out that Osama bin Laden was hiding somewhere in the Pakistani town of Abbottabad. They had narrowed it down to one specific compound, but they wanted to be sure that's where he was. So to do so, they hired a local doctor to join in on a hepatitis vaccination program for local children, because they could then collect the needles from that doctor and test the DNA to find if any of the children in that compound were related to Osama bin Laden, at which point they would raid the compound. That ultimately did not work because the doctor went to the compound and instead of being let in, someone there told him, you can't come in right now. Come back later. Call this phone number to figure out when you can come back. That phone number was then linked to Osama bin Laden, and then the military was able to raid the compound where they went in, they captured him, they killed him. This all boggled my mind at the time because it sure sounds like bin Laden wasn't even using a burner phone, which means they could have figured this out a number of different ways, like, I don't know, try to deliver him a pizza or something. The repercussions of that inane operation were serious and long-lasting. Pakistan kicked out several important charities working to help citizens, like Save the Children, which actually was trying to vaccinate the population, resulting in millions of dollars in aid going down the drain. And a concurrent polio vaccination program tanked because people assumed the U.S. military was probably behind that too, and that it wasn't actually set up to help them at all. Aid workers are still today fighting that resulting vaccine hesitancy. It's been more than a decade, and it's still causing problems. Anyway, who was the president during that bin Laden operation? That's right, everyone's favorite left-wing podcaster, Barack Obama. Again, the takeaway is not both sides are the same, but the biggest difference that I can see, at least in the way these operations went, is that one side, the Democrats, can at least be bullied into doing the right thing once it's revealed. Biden eventually put a stop to that anti-vax disinformation scheme. And as for Obama, the resulting uproar from public health officials forced the United States to officially ban the use of vaccination programs for covert operations. But you know, the 2020 operation wasn't actually a vaccination program. If anything, it was an anti-vaccination program, and there's nothing that says that that's illegal, so okay. A lot of replies on my recent lab leak video and every previous video on lab leak is that, well, you know, we can't trust China because they're lying liars who lie. And that's true. They do. They seem to have downplayed the severity of COVID early on, and of course they did spread that propaganda trying to claim that the virus started in the United States. Is it possible that COVID-19 started in a laboratory and they covered it up? Sure. But we have actual evidence that they did try to cover up anything involving that wet market because they dismantled it as soon as it was identified as the most plausible origin site. The animals that had been for sale were all disappeared. They refused to allow outside investigators to see the remains of the market, and they pulled out of a 4-country United Nations program designed to survey wet markets for their potential to cause future outbreaks. That very obvious cover-up is the entire reason why the lab leak has become a popular conspiracy theory today. So now just take a moment to imagine how people in Asia will react to this news that the United States government purposely spread anti-vaccine disinformation that resulted in substantial numbers of people dying. And think about what other conspiracy theories like lab leak will now spread there. And no matter how little evidence there is for them, there will be no good answer to the explanation of, well, they lied about that before. How can you trust them now? So congratulations to the Pentagon for doing what they do best, making the world a worse place for everyone. Can't wait to see the shocked Pikachu faces when the next pandemic rolls around, the world refuses vaccines, and we all die. Whew. That was a pretty bleak ending, wasn't it? Gonna have to go out of my way to find a particularly cute indie clip to end this one with. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.